New videos every day.
I'm David Armistead, here this afternoon to speak a little about stillness as a discipline and as a topic. I'm a student of stillness and participant in a community of students who practice certain types of stillness. And my experience with this topic is it is extraordinarily large and concrete, which is one of the difficulties in talking about it, because there's essentially no part of life that stillness is not already a part of and a necessity in. And most of us have almost no grooming or training in this. It's kind of like breathing is another one of these topics, and taking care of our bodies in general is one of these topics that most of us have very little education in, and yet it's fundamental to the quality of the life that we live. Stillness is the oddest thing because it actually requires practice. None of us appear to be born with great and inherent qualities for stillness, and yet stillness is at the core of all skillful action. I'll talk about how we do the practice of stillness for a little bit, and then I'll talk about how it's been helpful to me. In the current method I study, the way we do stillness is by entering it through movement. We don't enter stillness by attempting to hold still. That's sort of a counterintuitive insight, but it's a very important insight. We have found, and I have been taught, that the fastest way to get into deep states of stillness within our own interior, is by moving very slowly, and by slowing that down, and by slowing that down, and by slowing that down, until we are moving without moving at all, and coupling that to breathing so that we're breathing into and producing stillness through the way we breathe. So moving slower and slower and slower until that movement becomes totally just an interior experience, and then moving that slower and slower and letting that movement carry us into and through the gateway of true stillness. And that kind of motion, which starts with the exterior and moves deeper and deeper straight into the interior, is an extremely fast route to the sort of interior stillness that's the true stillness. Now, how this has been useful is in a variety of very pragmatic ways. One is, by practicing stillness, I'm more able to integrate exercise. So in terms of fitness, my ability to raise my fitness level is entirely dependent on how much value I can integrate from the exercise. If the exercise I take merely tears me down and I don't integrate it in a constructive way, it's not helping me. And I see all around me students who are actually slowing down their progress and even injuring themselves because their level of integration of the exercise doesn't match the exercise. And I have found that by matching the exercise I take with the practice of stillness, it explodes the amount of exercise I'm able to actually integrate. It actually raises significantly the value of the exercise I take. So I can directly relate my practice of stillness to my practice of healthy exercise. It also is one of those things where when I've overdone exercise, I can speed my recovery by taking time to do a practice of stillness along with it. So I find stillness and exercise to be married disciplines. They're not really separate. The second thing is, stillness as a practice sets me up to move profoundly into the world. One of my, many years ago, one of my Tai Chi teachers, who was an immigrant from China, was a very skillful artist. And he made the point over and over that the slower you move, the faster you can move. And the truism there is that often by not moving at all, nothing is required. It's the same thing as moving infinitely fast. When I'm able to really get in touch with stillness and I can practice stillness in action, in a meeting, let's say, or when I'm listening to someone, when I can actually be present with stillness, everything they're saying is crystal clear. All the nuances and all the illustrations and all the connections and all the possibilities for action that are present in that moment become accessible to me because I'm not trying to get anywhere. I can be present to what's being said. So the practice of stillness leads me to a deeper capacity for being present. And there's nothing more practical than being present when you need to be. I've also found that stillness leads me to a different kind of listening, which completely changes how I do business and how I do relationships and how I do friendships and how I do phone and how I do education and how I do training myself and how I do the accumulation of wisdom. Because with a deep listening, which requires stillness within, all that is possible is obvious. So my practice of stillness gives me a much different sense of the elusive obvious in life. And when life is revealing itself, which is what happens when your stillness and your inner silence are fully present, fully practiced, it becomes so much simpler to simply know your cues and to understand the moment. Now, that may not sound exactly like a recommended course of action, except for I haven't found anything to be as practical as that. In other words, when we arrive in life and let it come to us, it's the easiest way to live. Striving, action in striving is exhausting and often causes us to miss all our cues. And I know that in life the cues are there. The moment is full of signals about what's relevant. So this has application in relationships, in business, in education. It has applications in martial arts. It has applications in sports. It has applications in everything from race car driving to changing your tire. Being present to the moment is a skillful practice of life that is amplified by deliberate action to practice stillness.